Great. So this is the first domain, the integration of consciousness. It's interpersonal neurobiology fundamentals. And I'm doing a whole series. It's going to be at least 9 lectures plus an additional lecture for each one, where I take a Q&A and we experientially explore the domains. Because I find this content can be really heady. Like today's content is about how we focus our attention and how we use our mind. And I have to teach things, but in a way it gets us a little bit disconnected to teach the things. So after creating this whole PowerPoint, I thought, gosh, this is interesting. It's this quote from this book called The Moviegoer that I once liked a lot. And he said, sometimes we have to go a very long distance out of the way to go a very short distance the correct way. So I know I asked people to think about what are the tools, if we had a backpack to make us the best human beings on the planet, what would those tools be? And I entered in my stuff in the chat too. I want to read what people said here first. In this first slide, in this first domain, you see the eye of consciousness is the same eye that sees God. And I wanted to be clear in terms of the framework I'm coming from. The definition is connection and meaning. Spirituality is defined as a life of meaning and connection. And meaning is going beyond survival, and connection is like living beyond the solo self. And this is just like a bunch of collated data over the years of self-reports. And so beyond that, we definitely have our own personal opinions about religion, spirituality, and the texts that give us meaning and that take us to a higher place. And there can be expert guidance from people. All those things, role models are important. And when we're trying to integrate our consciousness, meaning and connection are where we go as we become more integrated. So spirituality, as I define it here, is the result of becoming more integrated. Just that a person has more meaning, more of a sense of purpose and connection with all of life. And as opposed to just feeling like you're a solo self. So the class description is learn how to achieve smooth sailing on the river of life. We're going to go through all the different domains of integration. They're progressive. Today we're talking about the first domain. In 2 weeks, we'll talk about bilateral hemispheric integration, which is the 2 hemispheres and making the corpus callosum robust. Then you're going to go into memory and narrative and all these. They're fantastic. Each one is fascinating in and of itself. So you want the 9 domains of integration. And I'm not going to go over them all today because it would take too much time. But what's important about them is that they're progressive. And you're going to see me refer to it's IPNB sometimes, and it's also relational neuroscience. That's the framework I'm coming from. And presence is the portal through which integration happens. So what we just did by going down into our ocean, we became more aware of our breath and our body. And presence it's this term, it means like receptive awareness. And the hub that we were just talking about with the wheel is where you were in the bottom of the ocean, the open plane of possibility. In this model, it represents the source of consciousness. So we all share the open plane of possibility, and it relates to quantum mechanics versus like when you're at the peaks, you're in more Newtonian physics and you're at words and sounds. What we did, we just heard the bell and we have the subjective experience. So this is actually the most interesting thing to me about this whole lecture is this moment. On the top part of this, you'll see there's the peaks, there's the hearing of the bell, there's the hearing of my voice, that was the known, and specifically, just to be clear, there's your subjective experience. And then there's also the neural firing which is the bottom part of this. And what I said is the most interesting thing to me about this lecture is that the space between these two, where your subjective experience ends and the neural firing patterns begin, we don't understand how these two relate. We really don't. And our separate identities come from the peaks and plateaus. We all have unique peaks and plateaus. I'm going to explain later on in the lecture when I talk about our mind's filters. I'm going to talk about how when we have unresolved trauma, it becomes like an indelible plateau that makes us think that we're in the open plane of possibility, but we're actually in this indelible plateau, and it prevents us from being able to really just interact, how would I say that, with full awareness and full responsiveness in the moment, because we would be tethered to this specific field. That's only when people have unresolved trauma. So that's just, I'll come into that in a minute. So pure awareness at the bottom doesn't have personal identity. So part one is on consciousness. I'm going to go through these definitions. I've given you a heads up on these. So consciousness is the subjective experience of being aware. And then we've got awareness, which is the mental experience of consciousness. So that was the first part of the lecture. The mind's consciousness can get the brain to change its function and structure. So this is why we're all here. This is it. This is the freedom of using your mind to go in, like you can be your own neurosurgeon, and everyone, if you want to do it, you can just have your little fingers, have your fingers be the little tools, and you could just kind of go into your brain and be like, I can change you by focusing my attention and thinking about new things. And I will teach you in these lectures how to do that, because there are ways that we can differentiate from things that really distract us and link us better to our goals. And there's skills, according to this model, that we can cultivate that allow us to be able to do that more quickly and more easily.